Yeah. So in the youth level, I'll say that, there's going to be some discrepancies in terms of the talent levels, right? When you get up to the pro level, different ball game. But at the youth levels, like if you're physically strong, you're really quick, you're agile, you can out athlete people, right? To a point. And one of the things that we always said is talent runs out. Talent runs out. So at the point that the talent runs out, what are you going to lean on? Then it's the mental side. Then it's the hard work. Then it's the nutrition, the ability to go longer. Then it's your rest and recovery, right? Then it's all those types of things, your flexibility. So it's all these things that you can't see on the court to prepare for. But, I would say, it was funny because we'd always ask the question, how much do you think the mental side impacts sports? And never did you hear a kid say less than 50%. There was 50%. And then you ask, well, how often do you train it? And oftentimes it's crickets. At IMG, we were training it at least once or twice a week. So at least you're getting it, but I don't know. You never know how to answer that question because I think it's different for every athlete. At the pro level, right? It's the success rate of teams and individuals is in the margins because everybody's got talent. Everybody can throw the ball fast. Everybody can hit the ball hard. Everybody can run hard. Everybody can run, they can do everything. They can shoot well, whatever. Right. So it's always in the margins. And I always say this, like we won the World Series in 2016 after 108 years in Game 7 in the 10th inning and extra innings by
Don't remind me.
Welcome to Limitless Minds, the podcast where curiosity meets greatness. Each week, co-host DJ Eidson and Harry Wilson sit down with some of the most exceptional individuals across sports, business, and beyond. From world-class athletes and peak performance coaches to visionary CEOs, entrepreneurs, and influential authors, they dive deep into the stories and strategies that drive extraordinary success. If you're ready to discover what it takes to be truly limitless and push beyond your own limits, you're in the right place.
On today's episode, we have the pleasure of spending some time with an old friend, Josh Lifrak. Josh is one of the leading innovators of peak performance for world-class athletes, most notably his work with the Chicago Cubs organization when he was the director of mental skills when they made their groundbreaking World Series run in 2016. He also spent a number of years training the best and brightest amateur athletes at IMG Academy, where he built a unique relationship with our late co-founder, Trevor Moawad. We were lucky enough to steal him away from Major League Baseball about 4 years ago to join our team here at Limitless Minds as the director of performance and coaching. Josh has seen it all and worked with the best performers in the world, and we are excited to chop it up with him today on today's episode. Enjoy. We have Josh Lifrak joining us from Sarasota, Florida. What's up, Josh?
Wow.
What's up, man?
Doing well, man. How you guys doing?
What's up? Good, man. Good.
You guys getting the fall weather yet? You guys getting the crisp air starting to come in for you guys?
Yeah, in the mornings, and then it gets hot. Then it gets hot outside.
Yeah.
So
it starts like 52 and ends up 85. That's what this is the next couple of days. But the fall's in the air. The band's playing. Football's here. It's good. Life is good up here in the Midwest.
Yeah, man.
Like that.
Well, Josh, we're excited to have you on, man. Obviously, we've known you for quite some time, and we're excited about introducing you to the audience here. And maybe we'll just start, with some of your overall background, right? Like, family stuff, where you're at, where you, kind of how you got here today. Certainly, you are well known as one of the, the world's greatest mindset coaches from Major League Baseball and beyond. So we'll certainly talk about your time in Major League Baseball, Chicago Cubs, and et cetera. And so we're excited to hear from you and talk about some of the insights that you've garnered over the years and share some with the audience. So, tell us a little bit about family and where you're at and all that stuff.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Sarasota, Florida. I've been down here, actually, I realized it the other day. I've been down here 19 years, which is amazing. So this is the place that I've lived the longest in my life, which is, it's like even more so than where I grew up. I grew up in upstate New York. Family is my beautiful wife, Karen, who Harry has sung karaoke with. DJ and I went hot water and a lemon that night, but Harry went out and went karaoke, and then my two amazing kids. One is 17; he's a senior in high school, going to college next year. Mind blowing. And then the other is in 8th grade. So two punk boys, and then my dog Apollo, who may make an appearance sooner or later during this podcast. He likes to bust into the office every once in a while. So
wouldn't be the first time. Wouldn't be the first time we had a dog on the show. So
I went down.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, hey, listen. So you're down there in Sarasota, Bradenton area. You're close to IMG Academy, where you spent a number of years down there, and that's actually where I think you met and built a really great relationship with our late co-founder Trevor Moad. Tell us about IMG and like what that place really is, because I think people have heard of IMG, some haven't. But tell us what IMG Academy is, what it feels like, and and also what they've built from a mental conditioning background there. That I think has been part and parcel to how your career is elevated over the years.
Yeah, so the Academy is an amazing and special place. It's literally about 10 miles from my house. It is a massive campus of just the best sports facilities you literally will ever see. I mean, it is akin to the level of professional sports, which I had the pleasure of working in for a number of years. And one of the things that's amazing about it is there's 80 different countries of students represented, 80 different countries. So you got kids from Colombia, you got kids from Canada, you got kids from Saudi Arabia, Korea, Japan, China, wherever. Name a country, India. They're going to be England, Scotland, whatever. There's a kid there from that country. And what it is basically, Trevor always used to call it the Hogwarts of sports for kids. And it's this training academy for youth athletes. And the kids some of them start as young as 10 years old. They go all the way through post-grad, and professional athletes will be training there. And basically the kids go to school. It's a prep school. So the kids go to school from 8 till noon. And then from 1 o'clock till 7 o'clock, they're doing their sport. And it's ridiculous. There's tennis is the main sport there. It was started as the Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy. Legendary Hall of Fame coach Nick Bollettieri started it. So tennis, you got golf. There's actual driving range and putting area and chipping area on campus, and then there's a little road off the back of campus that dumps you right onto an 18-hole golf course. They have soccer is another big sport there. There are tons and tons of fields. The U.S. national team trains there on a regular basis, as well as other countries bringing clubs in. Like, I know Arsenal was there. I know AC Milan trained there a little bit. Like, it's crazy. American football, track and field, lacrosse, basketball, baseball, volleyball they just put in, and they just put in softball as well. Dang. So it's nonstop. And then that's just the sports. Then on top of that, you have everything you could ever need from a performance standpoint. You have the physical conditioning, you have nutrition, you have mental conditioning, you have leadership skills, you have all the PT and anything you could ever ask for. And again, in my mind, I tell the story, I was consulting with the University of Southern California. And at the time, they had just built their brand new weight room. So this was Nike money, and it was like $100 million facility. And I just happened to be there consulting that week, and they opened it up and they invited me to the opening. So I went to the opening, and I'm like, this is a really beautiful weight room. It's almost as nice as the high school I work at. So it's like, that's the level of the quality at IMG. It's insane.
Yeah. How much does it cost to go there for a kid?
I don't know. I've heard the upwards of $70,000 to $80,000 a year. But I don't know the exact cost. And I'm sure they have scholarships for some of the athletes that they get through there to fill out some of the teams. So,
wow, that's incredible.
So you mentioned the mental conditioning programming there, like how did that, to your knowledge, like how did that start? What was your place in there? Like when you were doing daily work with these amateur athletes down there, what did that look like? I mean, is it open? Is it like office hours? Is it done in kind of teams and cohorts? Is it after, pre or post strength and conditioning? What's the daily work down there relative to mental conditioning?
Okay, so you got two questions there. I'm going to answer number one first, and then I'll get into the daily stuff. It was started, the mental conditioning program was started by Jim Lair, Dr. Jim Lair, who is pretty world renowned at this point. It was actually did a big program with Johnson & Johnson, who we've had the opportunity to work with a lot as well. But he was the one who started it. When I got there, there was two gentlemen who were really running it. A guy named Chad Bowling, who has been the director of optimal performance for the New York Yankees for probably now 15, 17 years, something to that nature. And he also is the director of mental skills for the Dallas Cowboys. He only works with big teams, apparently. So Manchester United, Arsenal are next, I think. But so that's Chad. And then the other guy was a guy named Trevor Moawad, who obviously was the best in the world at what he did. So it was those two, and they were starting their careers there. And so I had the privilege of learning and working with them. So that's kind of how it started. So it was like that. Now, at the present moment, my understanding is about 15 mental skills coaches now. When I was there, it was about 5 of us. So it's pretty incredible.
Wow.
Okay. So the day-to-day, I always joked that for being there for 10 years, I should have gotten like 5 PhDs, because it was on the ground work all day, every day. So it was get there at 7 a.m. before the sun is rising in the winters, and you're on court with 40 tennis kids who all of which are going to go play D1 schools, right? So you're on court with them, and you're dealing with what their practices, you're monitoring their practices, you're helping them out in practice. And then after the practice is over that day, you're going to go in and you're going to do a quick session on confidence or something like that, or visualization or something like that. Mm-hmm. Then from there, now it's about 10 o'clock in the morning. You got a little bit of a break. Maybe you have some individual clients come in, maybe a kid from basketball, maybe a kid from lacrosse, whatever. They come in. Then you get a quick lunch, probably a half an hour. And then in the afternoon, maybe there's a bunch of campers there. So you're going to take care of the campers and give them a session. Maybe there's a leadership class that you're going to jump into and help out with. At 2 o'clock, you're out on the fields again. Now you're dealing with soccer practice and you're working with the soccer kids. They finish up probably about 4 o'clock. Maybe you do a session with them. Then you hustle back over to our offices, and you got a basketball session that night. So all in all, I figured it out at the end of the day. I was on average giving a presentation or giving a talk 20 times a week. So multiply that by 10 years, 20 times a week, 10 years, you're looking at thousands upon thousands upon thousands of presentations. So it was definitely a proving ground for me, and it was awesome. And then, if you wanted to too, then you could go to games at night. Basketball's playing a game at night, football's playing a game. So you could just literally, I could have probably been there 20 hours a day if I wanted to.
How much do you think that when you're working with those athletes, the mental part of their game, how much do you think that it impacted them when you saw it there physically at IMG?
Yeah. So in the youth level, I'll say that, there's going to be some discrepancies in terms of the talent levels, right? When you get up to the pro level, different ball game. But at the youth levels, like if you're physically strong, you're really quick, you're agile, you can out athlete people, right? To a point. And one of the things that we always said is talent runs out. Talent runs out. So at the point that the talent runs out, what are you going to lean on? Then it's the mental side. Then it's the hard work. Then it's the nutrition, the ability to go longer. Then it's your rest and recovery, right? Then it's all those types of things, your flexibility. So it's all these things that you can't see on the court to prepare for. But, I would say, it was funny because we'd always ask the question, how much do you think the mental side impacts sports? And never did you hear a kid say less than 50%. There was 50%. And then you ask, well, how often do you train it? And oftentimes it's crickets. At IMG, we were training it at least once or twice a week. So at least you're getting it, but I don't know. You never know how to answer that question because I think it's different for every athlete.
That's right. Yeah. But it's important. It's important. You just don't know really. You can't gauge the percentage necessarily for each athlete.
But I'll say this at the pro level, right? It's the success rate of teams and individuals is in the margins. Because everybody's got talent. Everybody can throw the ball fast. Everybody can hit the ball hard. Everybody can run hard. Everybody can run, they can do everything. They can shoot well, whatever. Right. So it's always in the margins. And I always say this, like, we won the World Series in 2016 after 108 years in Game 7 in the 10th inning and extra innings.
Don't remind me. Don't remind me, man.
Sorry, DJ.
The Guardians. Were they the Guardians then, or still the Indians?
They were the Indians then. But they changed a couple years after that.
Well, you mentioned the World Series, so let's take that journey, right? So how did you end up, decade at IMG in Sarasota, in the Bradenton area, and then end up with, honestly, one of the most storied organizations in sports, formerly known as the Lovable Losers, and help them win a World Series, at Wrigley Field? Like, how did you go from there to there?
Yeah. So one of the things about the academy was because it was understood to be this really high level training facility, you had people coming in all the time from different organizations to kind of pick our brains about how we were doing stuff there. Because even today, you were there with me a couple of years ago, Harry. It's probably about 5 years ahead of every other sport, like every other facility. And the reason they can do that is because ultimately they want to win, but winning and losing isn't going to determine whether they are employed or not, the coaches, right? It's more about the retention of the athletes and the development of the athletes. And so, so they can try stuff, they can experiment, they can push the boundaries of typical training. So we get a lot of people in. Yeah. So there would always be Major League Baseball people rolling through. So you get to meet a couple and you get to shake hands, you get to talk to people, et cetera, et cetera. And, when I got hired by the Cubs, 30% of all the mental skills people in Major League Baseball had worked at IMG. So think about that. Out of all so there's 30 teams in Major League Baseball, I think 32, I'm not sure exact number, but 10 to 12 people had worked at IMG some way, shape, or form. And we're now doing the mental skills in Major League Baseball, which was an absolute stamp of approval. Yeah. So we were a known commodity. So oftentimes Major League Baseball would come and try and knock on our door and say, hey, is anybody interested? So the story is that I actually interviewed with the Indians at the time, the Guardians now, and I was not the right fit for them. As you two know, I maybe I'm a little disorganized sometimes, but I'm also going to be a little spontaneous sometimes and things like that. And they're a very buttoned up organization. And honestly, I wasn't the right fit for them. But they had a relationship with the Chicago Cubs, and they called them after my interview and they said, you guys have been looking for a director for about 10 months. We found your guy. Here's Josh's number. Give him a call. So out of nowhere, the Cubs called me. Scott Harris, who's now the president of the Detroit Tigers, gave me a call, and we started talking and it went from there.
Wow! So you took that failure with the Indians, then to go to the Cubs and find success, which is incredible. And much to the detriment of Cleveland fans.
Full circle.
That's right. Full circle. As you when you worked in Chicago and got to work with that team, is there any story or person that stands out that really exemplified mental conditioning and embodied what you taught?
So in terms of the athletes, I think the whole team was really mentally strong. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There was a lot of people that had a say in that, including Joe Madden, who probably was the exact right manager for that team, a guy who understood that it was about the heartbeat sometimes more than it was about the statistics. And he really, embodied everything that we believed in. And so all the athletes were fantastic in terms of mental side. They had bought in it was the youngest team in the history of the World Series to win, more guys under the age of 26 than any other team in the history of Major League Baseball to win. And most of those players had come through the system. And that's where they got a lot of their mental skills training to prepare them to be ready for the big stage. A lot of the guys that we brought in as free agents had really strong mental skills backgrounds. Right. Lester, Lackey, Rossi, all those guys, right. They were like really strong mentally. Hayward, all those guys. And so if there was a person, honestly, that I saw as being like really mentally tough, it was actually our president, Theo Epstein, who was this incredible leader who cared about the person first versus the statistics, which is like kind of what baseball is today. It seems like it's more statistic oriented than person oriented. And really was this person who, even when he was upset or frustrated, could get back to that neutral space quickly to figure out what to do next in order to go the next levels. And then to his credit, when he saw the opportunity to go all in for that 2016 Cubs team, he did. He made some really bold trade deadline moves and pushed all the chips in the middle of the table, said, hey, we believe in you guys. Let's go. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Well, when you mentioned, you just mentioned the word system, right? Which obviously these organizations are a system. There's minor leagues and there's several, tracks you go on from single A to high A to double A to triple A, et cetera. And so you have all these young men that are coming through. And it seems like the best organizations have a standard, right? And it's, it's hard enough to create team success, and tie it in with mindset and everything, and make sure everybody's kind of at the same level. I was listening to a quote from Nick Saban, who Trevor worked with, obviously, and maybe Nick got this from Trev, but he talked about the standard, and I heard him say that the standard is so critical because it's hard to build team chemistry without it, right? Because mediocre people don't like high achievers, and high achievers don't like mediocre people. So you got to try to get everybody to this standard to where they can build that chemistry. How did you see that resonate with the Cubs organization in that particular year, and maybe even the couple of years leading up to it, right? Because it doesn't just happen overnight. Usually that standard is built over time. So how did you see that? How did you see that actually come to life for the Cubs organization during that time?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. Number one, there was a standard being built in the minor league system again, right? So it was the thing in the minor league system that we always talked about was that's Cub. And so we would just catch guys doing the right things. And when they did the right things, we'd call them out, hey man, that's Cub, right? Hit the cutoff man. And when you're supposed to hit the cutoff man, boom, that's cut. Cub makes a good pitch, 2-0 count, man on second, 2 outs in the 8th inning, up by 1. Yo, that's Cub, way to make that pitch. Things like that. We would call it out. And so that was part of it, was teaching them through affirmation versus like punishment, what it was to be Cub. So that was number one. Number two is, again, I mentioned Joe Madden earlier. The first day Joe Madden became a manager, the first time he ever met the team, he comes out and he gives a talk. And he brings everybody together. We're in Mesa, Arizona, and everybody's kind of like, they're trying to feeling him out. They'd heard a lot about him in Tampa, right? He had all the success in Tampa, and they're, who is this guy? What's he all about? And the first thing he says, okay, guys, I have 2 rules, and that's it. Okay, you live by these 2 rules, and we're going to be great this year. Okay, number 1 rule is don't be late. Be on time, show up on time whenever you want to, like whenever we have anything. Look at the schedule, make sure you're on time. The second rule is on the plane, if you look hot, wear it. And that's it. Those are the only rules. Okay. Everything else, well, you guys monitor yourselves. So it was amazing, right? And it was really funny because at the time, to go on the planes, which I'm still not quite sure I understand why we do this, but in Major League Baseball, you got to put a tie on. Some guys, a suit and tie for some guys. They have to, at least khakis and a nice shirt, button-down shirt, right? It's just like, why? I'm just getting on a plane, falling asleep and waking up, getting on a bus. Nobody's even going to see me, and then I'm in a hotel. So it was like, so his whole thing was like, if you look hot, wear it. He didn't care. Right? He was just like, hey, we're loose on that. So I think that those kind of things set the tone. Like, we trust you. Like, we're going to trust you first, and then, we're going to earn your trust. So I think that was part of it too. And even in his press conference, I think he talked about that. But that's kind of how we did the standard. And then, we would do stuff until we got it right. We wouldn't do stuff like, even in fielding practice and things like that. They would just do stuff over and over and over again until they got it right. That's when you would move on, is when it was nailed. And so that team, fielding wise, was the historically the best fielding percentage out of any team ever in Major League history. So, I think
wow, that's awesome. You mentioned affirmations, you mentioned language in that's Cub and how that's important. For you and your peers, like in the MLB, what does the daily work look like though for, as far as mental conditioning, daily, monthly, weekly work look like?
Well, the day of a Major League Baseball player is show up at depends, right? Depends if you've traveled, depends if it's a day game, whatever. But a typical 7 o'clock start game, show up around noon, 1 in there. They're going to do some stretch and prehab type stuff, maybe get some work in terms of hitting, or, if they're doing some throwing program stuff for pitchers, right? So they're going to have a block of time when they're on field working or in the cages working. And then they'll have a kind of a down period before the game starts, and then they play the game, and they finish the game. Some guys work out after the game. Some guys stretch, whatever. They got to get their treatment, and then they're out. So, a typical day goes from about 12 to 1, 12 noon to 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Sometimes, depends on how long the game lasts. So it's a long day. And as a mental skills person, what you're trying to do is you're trying to find pockets within that period to help out. So there may be some times where you're talking to a guy and, whatever, you're in the cages with him and you're just kind of sitting back and he's waiting his turn to go to his next round. And you're just kind of getting some work done there. Maybe even doing some stuff in the cage with him. Sometimes you jump in a hitter's meeting or a pitcher's meeting, and you'll have 5 minutes to discuss something. The thing about Major League Baseball is 162 games. It's every single day. So you don't have to blow them all out of the water in an hour-long session, on Tuesday, June 30th or whatever, right?
Yeah. Right.
You're just little nuggets all the time. And then support. A lot of the work is done in spring training where you can get, 4 or 5 sessions in that lay the groundwork for the year. And then it's just little snippets. You got to be creative, a lot of text messaging, a lot of sharing of Instagram reels, a lot of, just different little things, little messages here and there, in their note that you put in their locker, whatever, just little things all the time. Little by little becomes a lot. So that's how you do it.
It's good.
The aggregate of marginal gains, just
stacking.
Yeah, I remember somebody saying that a while back. That's right.
I love that. Well, the thing about baseball, and I had the fortune and maybe misfortune of playing baseball for a long time, right? And I say misfortune just because it's a game of failure, right? Particularly at the plate, right? So, your best of the best are going to bat 300. They'll go to the Hall of Fame. They're failing 70% of the time. Your kind of average player, average to good player is going to bat 280, right? You have some guys in the All-Star game that are south of that, right? And they might be in the All-Star game for various reasons. But when you're kind of living in a, kind of soaking in failure daily, it's a grind mentally, right? And so how do you train an athlete to learn how to fail at that level so they can actually, win in those little opportunities along the way and to stack a great year?
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it there, Harry. It is this challenge of not buying into the results. So if you're chasing results, you're going to forget about how to get those results. And so you're just going to be like, I just need a hit, or, I just need a good outing, whatever. Right. And so that oftentimes can lead to pressure, stress, gripping the ball too tight, gripping the bat too tight, etc. So it's always about coming back to what we call the process. And I always said this in baseball specifically, the hitter's job is not to get a hit, strangely enough. I've asked this to many athletes, hey, what's your job as a hitter? They're like, to get a hit. And I'm like, no, your job to get a hit, how you get a hit is you choose a good pitch and you put a good swing on it. So that's your job, is to choose a good pitch and put a good swing on it. And then you start breaking it down like that. So you'll talk to a guy after he's 0 for 7 and you go, hey, listen, you haven't had a hit in the last 2 games, but were you choosing good pitches to swing at? Absolutely. Did you put good swings on it? My swing's a little bit laggy today. It's a little bit slow. Okay, let's get in the cage. Let's get to work on it. Let's get to work on your swing. No, I didn't choose good pitches there. Well, why not? What were you looking for? I didn't have a plan. Okay, let's start having a plan. Right. And so then you can kind of break it down that way on the mental side, where they can get back to a process where they can have success in things they control. And that's the whole key. What do you control? Control what you control. Kenny Ravizza, who I had the opportunity to work with in Chicago, control the controllables, right? What can I control in this circumstance? And I think that plays out in life too, right? What can I control, and am I controlling it? And if the answer is yes, I am controlling it, then just have faith and trust and belief that it's going to work out, because it will.
Yeah. And I think that, for somebody that's playing 162 games, if you're healthy and you play 162 games, the average player is probably going to have somewhere between 700 and 900 at bats, right? If my math is okay, right? Like about 700, 900 at bats, so I think also understanding that, that message of the past does not predict the future, right? Last at bat does not dictate what happens in this at bat, right? Now you kind of educate yourself at bat to at bat, because the pitcher is educating themselves on, on your tendencies, just like you're educating yourself on their tendencies. But 0 for 7 doesn't mean the next 7 are going to go over, right? So I think that training that mind to understand that, to have that that amnesia from at bat to at bat, is probably pretty critical, is what you've probably seen, right?
Yes, and I'll yes and you on that one. There's things that you do have to know, and there's things that you have to understand about what the ball does out of the guy's hands, or if there's any tells or things of that nature, especially at the major league level. They're so good. So there's a little bit of like, so the amnesia comes in after you've made your plan. Right. And then you're just executing the plan that you have for that at bat. And you're not worrying about what happened in the past. You're just like fastball here, attack, slider, stay off because it dies, right? Whatever, right? So, and the same thing from the pitcher standpoint. You know, here's what I can execute today. Let me go execute it. So,
no, that makes sense. And Josh, obviously, you've been around and been part of any successful team. I think it was 17 after you just won. Didn't you just win a big one with your kids here?
Well, it's actually better if you count the co-ed middle school summer rec league that we just won 6th to 8th grade. You know, it's banner 18. We're gonna
18. So we'll count that 18.
We'll count that one. It might have been the second most impactful one that I've ever been.
I love it. I love that you count that one.
Oh yeah, number 18. But yes, I've been a part of 17 different championship teams.
And as you've had success, and you know, one of the things I would say if I were to say, you know, one of words to describe you, I would say one of them would be humility. What advice would you give a high performer or somebody that's striving to be a high performer around this area of humility? And what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, I mean, first of all, baseball is going to humble you no matter what. If you're not humble, it's going to humble you. That's the, you know, they call it the, you know, the gods, right? So the gods of baseball. And so, yeah, you better, like, humility is key. I think one of the big reasons that humility is key is because it creates an ethos of work, right? I remember talking to Trevor, and I had the opportunity to work with a bunch of guys from Coronado, the Naval Special Forces group, and we got to spend a bunch of time with them as we worked through IMG with them, and then Trevor went on to do a lot more stuff with them afterwards. But one of the things that they taught us, which was really interesting, was the highest performing guys that were SEALs. They had two common personality traits. Number one was they were high confidence, which makes total sense. Like, you got to believe in yourself. But then the second level was they were high anxiety as well, which I thought was really interesting until they explained it to me. And they said the way that they think about it is there's somebody out there getting better than I am, but I'm strong enough that if I put in the work, I'm going to beat them. So it was like that. Like, I had to work and I had to get going. So I think humility on another side of things, humility is so key because it can engender this work ethic. And it can make you, hey, if you think you got it all figured out, you're just going to take it easy. You're going to put it in neutral and you're going to just coast. So we don't want that. We don't want coasting. We want driving forward. We want getting better. We want improvement, development, growth, right? And the only way you're going to do that is if you don't think you've got it all figured out.
That's so interesting. I've never heard humility tied to like high performance and behavior that just activating those behaviors like you just explained it right there. It makes a ton of sense too when you talk about having a growth mindset, aggregate and marginal gains, a lot of the stuff that we teach. So for sure.
I mean, I think as soon as you think you've arrived, right, you know, like, where do you go from there, right? I mean, it's kind of like we talk about potential a lot, and potential has always been a funny word to me because, you know, everybody, you know, you ask a group of people, hey, who wants to reach their potential? Everybody raises their hands, but when you really think about it, it's like, well, if I reach my potential, where do I go from there?
Then what?
If I've already arrived, where do I go? And so I think the key thing is to skill up, both physically, mentally, mind, body, soul, the whole nine, right? Skill up so that way the potential rises. And then the real goal is to just close the gap between what we actualize and that potential, right? And so, you know, so I think that some of the best teams, organizations, individual contributors, you know, begin to realize that, you know, today's potential is not necessarily tomorrow's potential. You know, as I successfully, you know, see those aggregate of marginal gains, the potential rises. And so now the question is, how do I stack days so that way I get closer and closer to actualizing potential as that potential is rising.
That's right.
I love that, Harry. Actualize potential, because what that is action. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, here's this like thing that's like this nebulous potential thing. But if you actualize it, that means you're putting it to work, and whatever is possible is being executed. And I think that's one of the biggest words since I've been working with you guys at Limitless is like execution. That's just a word that just keeps coming up over and over and over again, because that's what it is. It's about executing on a daily basis at a very high level. And if you do that, then you're actualizing your potential.
That's right.
Yeah. Hey, Josh. So a lot has happened since 2016, right? Obviously been 8 years. We've had a global pandemic. Media, social media is changing and shifting. How organizations do things, how they scout. How the player has to respond to adversity and in a very, very public way, et cetera. What today in 2024 and moving forward, how do you see, what do you see as the biggest problem that athletes, the best and the best, but that athletes have to solve for? What's the biggest challenge that athletes are facing today that's to be solved for?
That's a great question. I think, so like you just mentioned, that everything is under a microscope and everything gets really, really fast, like news travels. So they have to, they got to be a little bit careful about how they're handling themselves off the field. Like they really do. They gotta check. Ice Cube, right? Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Like that is
because shotgun bullets are bad for your health.
Exactly. DJ, look at that. DJ.
Hey, that's it, man. You give me the microphone, right?
So off the field stuff is huge. And again, they're under a microscope. So I think there's like that sense that maybe they can't just breathe, right? You can't exhale because everything is being seen and monitored and all that. Okay. That's number one. The other thing is this, and I think that this has always been the case for athletes, but now more so than ever, is what story are they creating in their own minds about what's happening, right? We use a formula all the time, E plus S equals R. The event plus the story you make up about the event equals your response. And so I think that athletes there's a lot of different stories that are written about them and about who they are and what they're doing on the field and stuff like that. But they have to design their own narrative in their own heads. And if they can do that, if they can create their own identity within themselves and they can hold true to that, regardless of what's going on outside, and they can know who they are as a person first and an athlete second, then I think they're going to be okay. But I think that's been the story always. I think it's just exacerbated now with social media and the amount of just junk that comes at them. I was shocked at I've read through some of the social media stuff from different players and things like that, especially when we're in New York. I mean, it's harsh there. And you're just shocked at some of the stuff that people say. They're hiding in their basements, typing away on their mom's computer, and they're absolutely crushing these guys. And you're just like, man, just don't do that. Don't look at social, guy. Don't do it. It's not worth it.
Yeah. I mean, and what's interesting about that is like a double-edged sword, because whether you're talking about NIL with the college kids or, professional athletes, social media, there's money and revenue generated behind that. So how do you stay away from it, but yet also embrace it because it can add to your brand, it can create revenue? That balance is very interesting. Was there anything that you saw how people handled that in a healthy way? That balance.
Yeah, I hired somebody to run it for them. They didn't run it themselves. Maybe there was here and there they would do some stuff on it, but they just take it, run it. If this is going to be for brand management and brand, ambassador type stuff and like lifting me up as something off of the field, then let somebody else run that. I've seen that a lot, and I think that helps them. And then they can kind of keep it separate, right? They can keep it out of the locker room, as it were.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, you talk often at the power of negativity, right? And that's something Trev talked about. It's something that are kind of part and parcel to our fundamentals that we train and coach at Limitless. Talk a little bit about some of the data and science behind negativity and why it's so powerful, and why media pushes so much of the negative narrative. Like, what is that? Why is that?
Yeah.
And then I guess the second question is how do you combat that?
Yeah. So to answer your first thing, right? So what we know is that between 75 and 90% of our thoughts are typically going to lean negative. And, this is done from various research sources. So it's one of those things that our brains are geared towards that for the survival instinct, right? To be able to live a longer life as our DNA was founded back in the day when you didn't have Grubhub, you had saber-tooth tigers, right? And so it was a little bit of a challenge to, get food, let alone survive past 30, right? So the whole thing was you have to be a little bit negative because you have to be in this protection defensive mode to make sure that you survive and that your line continued. And so that's the first thing. That's why the news is so negative, because we are geared towards that. We're geared towards protecting ourselves and survival. So we are going to be, that's the shiny object. The shiny object is something negative because we want to be prepared, And if you watch, it's amazing, right? If you watch the news or just look at it, just look at like how much is just fear. It's unreal. And yes, some stuff is facts, and it's we need to know it. Like if a hurricane's coming, I got to know, right? So I can pack up and get out of here. But there's a storm that's off the coast of Africa right now that has a 10% chance of turning into something. I'm serious. I looked on the National Hurricane Center, right? I go on there. It's one of my spots. Living in Florida, you got to do that. And it's got like a 10%. And I saw like an article on 3 big storms forming, and it's just like no, there's a less than 10% chance it's going to form. Right. They're monitoring it. That's all they're doing. They're monitoring, but that's not a hurricane yet. A hurricane's a hurricane, So, but that's what they do and so it's like I click on it. Stupid, right? That's what you want. Click. Okay, they got money. They got advertising money, right? So I think one of the big things is to, I think negativity. Like you got to look at what sources are bringing you negativity in your life. It could be people. Right, Harry, you made a great point about this in Indianapolis when we were just there at the dinner you and I were hosting, was that, like look through those, monitor yourself first, check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? Monitor yourself first, where you go through and you say, hey, how often am I adding to this negativity? Maybe this person's negative in their text messages towards me, but then how much am I stoking those flames? Am I like, oh yeah, that stinks. I agree. That's the worst. Oh, she's such a jerk. Right. He's an idiot, whatever. Right. If you're doing that, then you're adding to the fire. Right. And so that's some of it too, is that, checking where you are. And your point there was like, look at it. Look, last 2 weeks, go last 2 weeks of text messages. How much have you been adding? And now challenge yourself because with text messaging, especially, you get that pause, right? You don't have to answer right away. Right. And you can take that deep breath and go, oh, wait a second. What am I going to respond here? So,
yeah. No, that's it. It sounds like a lot of the stuff we mentioned, the late Trevor Moawad. Actually, this month will be 3 years. September 15th will be 3 years, which is crazy. As you think back of your relationship with him and, and your friendship with him, how did he influence you in what you do today?
Yeah. 2 things. Number one, is he basically taught me how to capture an audience and how to connect with athletes. Like I would have never, like you could figure it out. It would have taken a lot longer, but Trev was a master at that. You guys saw him present. It was an hour and a half presentation and people were like, wait, once it felt like 5 minutes.
Right.
It happened. It was like amazing. Right. So he was a master at that. And so he taught me a lot of the skills and tools of public speaking and how to engage an audience and how to be present and how to connect with them and make them laugh and use humor in the right spots. And he was just spectacular at that. So that's number one. Number two, so I have 3 things actually. Number 2 was he taught me this rule. And the rule is always find a way. There's no other option. It's kind of like burning the boats type of thing. But especially when you're working with athletes, you just find a way to get it done. It doesn't matter. Nothing else matters other than getting the job done. So the example I use is when I was an intern at IMG Academy. This is back, late 90s. So we're using handheld video cameras with like tapes, put them in, right? VCR type stuff. And it's Florida in the summer, so it's super humid. So guess what would happen to the cameras? They would lock up, right? They would get so humid that they wouldn't work and they wouldn't record because the tape and all that stuff. And Trev had me go out to a baseball game. He's like, look, I need 3 at-bats of this kid hitting. And I get out there and sure enough, the camera locks up. And I called Trev, it's not working. I'm not going to be able to get it. Josh, find a way. Just find a way, dude. Find a way. That's all that matters. Find a way. So I end up going around the the stands, and I find a woman who has like a digital video camera at the time, and she's a mom of one of the kids playing on the other team. And I asked her if I could borrow it just for a couple at bats for this kid. Sure enough, she lets me borrow it. I tape it. I transfer that over to a VCR tape later on, and I get the camera back to her. And, that was it. That was find a way. You just got to find a way. It doesn't matter. Just find a way. Think outside the box. So he was a master of that. And then the third thing, Trev was always a guardian angel for me. Every job I ever got, Trev somehow was influencing that in some manner, putting a good word in GM's ears or pushing me forward to meet you guys or whatever it might be. He was always the person who was moving me forward and believed in me. Even if he didn't just say, "Hey, Josh, I believe in you," he showed it through his actions.
Yeah.
You can tell a true friend through what they do, not what they say. Right. You can tell a true friend from what they do and not what they say. When I left the Cubs in 2019, I jumped off of a cliff. I had no parachute on. I had no clue what I was doing. And Trev was the one who stepped up during that period more than anybody else and put me in position to be successful. So
that's awesome, dude. Well, you've been a blessing to us, man. No question. And I love how you say find a way. Harry, when Harry and I jumped, out of pharmaceuticals 6 years ago now, I think that has come across our mind, hundreds of times through this journey. How do you figure out a way? Because at the end of the day, when we do figure out the way, you're going to just impact millions and millions of people. And so you've been part of that journey. We appreciate that, and we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the late great Trevor Moawad as being a part of that. So that's really cool to hear how he influenced you. For sure.
Well, I mean, I remember, and obviously influenced you, and he was a full force multiplier, right? Because, just like you talk about like a Nick Saban having a coaching tree, right? Where all these guys end up getting big jobs down the road. I think Trevor had his own version of a coaching tree, from you to Travis Thomas to Darren McMahon's to the list goes on, right? I think that, and even guys that maybe weren't in your space, but worked with you in Major League Baseball. So there's a guy that that I know named Bobby Basham, and Bobby Basham was a part of the front office for the Chicago Cubs. Yep. And I went to Richmond. I went to University of Richmond with him. He was a baseball player as well, and he was significantly more successful in baseball than I was. But he ended up playing, professionally for some time. Then found himself in the front office with the Cubs. But years later, I had a drink with him in Louisville, Kentucky. I had a little whiskey with him, and I was just rapping to him about what we're up to, and he's like, you need to meet a guy named Josh Lifrak, and I was like, Bobby, like he's the OG, like he's a part of the platform, like he's
Josh Lifrak from way back, man, you know him.
Yeah, and he was like. He was just like, what? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, you got Bobby, you got Josh Lifrak. I'm like, well, he called you Frack, right? He's like, you got Frack.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah. That's baseball. Frack.
Yeah. And he was just saying that like you're one of the best in the game, and how lucky we were to have you on the squad. And he's right. But so even folks in the front offices at these places like Chicago Cubs have a tremendous amount of respect for you. And
no question.
Bobby's currently,
Harry.
Yeah. Well, Bobby's currently the director of baseball innovation for the Cubs, right? And so obviously from an innovation perspective, having something like that, say, oh, wait a second, this guy is that guy. He's that dude, right? Yeah, from a mental fitness perspective, as you guys look to innovate in that sport, I think it says a lot. So
I think Bobby and I spent a lot of time together. We had offices right near each other. So no offense, but it's great to hear. And it's humbling to say the least.
Did you ever go to that coffee shop down like kind of on the corner from the stadium called Uncommon Ground?
Oh yeah. I still get emails from them all the time because apparently I signed up for an email from them.
Well, Courtney and I live right down the street from that, and so we'd always end up there, and we'd always see Theo Epstein in that Uncommon Ground, and so it was a nice little spot.
It's funny though because it wasn't like really a coffee shop; it was like more of like a restaurant, and then they would like have live acoustic bands and stuff.
Is that right?
Yeah,
that's right up my alley, man.
Great brunch. Oh,
okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, solid. Good. How were their nachos, Harry? Nachos good?
Didn't have nachos there.
It's an upscale place, man. We ain't doing nachos.
Dropping inside jokes. He's dropping inside jokes on the episode. It's not, the listeners don't know, but
I just asked about nachos, man. We were talking about chicken wings, nachos. No, he loves nachos, especially in Chicago. That's for a later episode.
DJ, it's amazing. They have this great mayonnaise. You would love it.
Yeah.
Too many inside jokes and their hot water lemon. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's right.
Yeah. Well,
Josh,
214 degrees instead of 212. Just saying.
So you and I have had the conversation around. We mentioned Trevor about his legacy and carrying his legacy forward. What are your thoughts around that, man? How do you continue to carry Trevor's legacy forward?
So I think the biggest thing, right, is whenever you're trying to honor somebody or carry their legacy, it's just you got to show up with your A game every time. So that's number one, right? So we're teaching neutral mindset. We're teaching all the things we teach at Limitless Minds: adversity tolerance, non-negativity, all these different pieces that were all Trev's, concoctions out of his mind that he developed. And so that's number one, is we're teaching this stuff, but then also too, it's like living it, right? And so we have to live it as well in everything that we do. And then the third thing is like, you just don't stop, right? We're not satisfied with presenting to, 12,000 people at McDonald's. Like, that's great. We did it. Let's keep going. What else can we do? How can we get not only their general managers, but how can we get the people in their stores, right? And so that's the other part of it, is just like, it's not just the audiences that you're meeting. It's the people that we don't even know yet that we're going to impact. That's the ones that matter. There's people out there, and I said this on a social media post the other day, Harry and DJ, like, there's people out there that we haven't met yet that we're going to impact so profoundly that they don't even know it yet, right? It's like, like that that's the stuff that drives me. It's just like, okay, here we go,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's
awesome.
In addition to that, I think that we have this, tremendous mission and duty to democratize access to mental fitness coaching, right? So, because I remember, Maria Shriver told Trevor, like, hey, this needs to go to the masses, right? This needs to go to the masses. And so collectively we thought, like, how do we do that? What does that look like? What does scale really look like? And that's something that obviously here at Limitless, we're trying to innovate to take what is also obviously impactful and measurable, but how do we scale it, right? And so I think that you've been a big part of that journey, and will continue to be a part of that journey as we look to democratize, world-class mindset coaching, like Trev, like yourself, like the other coaches in our platform. So we're grateful that you're a part of this thing, man.
Well, thank you. And I think, to that point, like, how do we do it? We do it one at a time. And that's it, one at a time. That's it.
Yep.
And we just keep doing that. And we, Kenny Ravizza, one of my, again, who I mentioned earlier, he always used to say, when you do good work, work finds you, right? When you do good work, work's going to find you. So we just keep doing great work, and it's going to keep coming.
That's a really good quote. I love that.
Yeah. Love it. Well, this is a good place to close. I'm sure, Josh, given the work that you do for Limitless Minds, the company, I think we'll probably have you as an occasional or regular guest on the.
I think he could come back, man. When you drop 2 or 3 Ice Cube references, you gotta invite that guest back. Period.
My 13-year-old just started listening to it. It was a good day, and I was like, "Oh, I can't believe I'm letting him listen to this." But it's a great song. We gotta listen to it.
I think I was about 13 when I first heard it was a good day.
Got a triple-double, man.
Is that a rite of passage? Is that a rite of passage?
It almost is, man. It almost is.
Basketball player.
Parental advisory. If it had that on the case, man, stay away.
I was just happy my wife wasn't in the car when we were listening to it, because I would have gotten one right upside the head. Like,
dude.
So Josh, any parting words of wisdom from one of the world's greatest?
Yeah, so in terms of mindset, right? Whatever performance you are doing, whether it be corporate space, whether it be athletic space, whether it be education space, whatever, we're performing every single day. The elements of performance, one of the major elements that helps you perform at a high level is how you approach it mentally. And so my thing is this, like, training the mental side doesn't take 4 hours a day, right? Literally, it probably takes about 5 to 10 minutes a day. And so train the mindset, like, do it, get out there, do stuff, meditate, visualize, have affirmations that you say to yourself, remind yourself about what you're doing good, do after action result, after you're done with stuff, and just keep on going with it. Because I think when you do train the mind, it gives you this massive competitive advantage, because a lot of people aren't doing it. And so that would be the last thing I would say, is like, you can train the mind. And I'll give you the quote that I always say when we're doing presentations: when you do the work works on you. right? So do the work, and then the work's going to work.
The work's on you. I love that, man. I love that's really great.
A lot of work quotes today. Just work quotes.
Tons of work quotes. Hey, Josh, and where can we find if we want to find you online? Where do we find Josh Lifrak?
Yeah, two best places are LinkedIn, Joshua Lifrak, just my name, and then Instagram, Joshua Lifrak as well. I'm on all the social media platforms, but those are the two.
Yes.
You know, I'm posting basically on all. I just figured out how you can just like schedule it, and they all post at the same time.
Okay, all right. I'm a huge Instagram fan of yours.
Getting better.
I like the post. Yeah.
So
love your post.
but LinkedIn definitely for professionals out there, and then you know, Instagram I think is a little bit more of the casual user, and you know, whatever. That's the best way to get me.
I love it, man. Well, I appreciate everything you said about making this a part of your daily hygiene, right? And doing the 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 minutes of work daily, right? Because you shouldn't wait until there's a problem, right? Or you know, some sort of, you know, challenge to kind of solve for, you know, your mindset and your optimization and your adversity tolerance. And so, as Trevor would say, and we like to say, you don't have to be sick to get better. We'll see you on the next episode.